virtually.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And before Senator Schatz begins, I'm going to ask Senator Kaine to preside so I can vote and come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Blinken, thank you for appearing before the committee. I want to sort of zoom out a little bit. The defense establishment, political appointees, so-called think tank experts, defense contractors are complaining loudly about tactics because it's their strategy that failed. They're complaining about how America's longest war ended because they didn't want it to ever end. And they're mad because they think we should be an occupying force indefinitely. And they know that position is untenable. So they dive into tactics. They want to talk about holding on to Bagram for longer or sending forces into Kabul. They won't acknowledge the fundamental mistake was that we invaded a country in Central Asia without a good understanding of its people, its history, or of its culture. After 20 years, trillions of dollars spent and training of hundreds of thousands of Afghan security forces, the Afghan government we installed was no more capable of being the referee in a civil war than before we invaded. That's not the fault of our service members or diplomats. It's the fault of policymakers who set unrealistic goals. And so the basic question I have for you, Mr. Secretary, is what are the lessons of the last 20 years of war?
Well, Senator, I think you actually summed it up extremely well. And I would say two things, just to put a fine point on it. We went to Afghanistan for one reason, and that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11, to bring them to justice, and to the best of our ability, make sure that that would not happen again from Afghanistan. And we largely succeeded in that effort a long time ago, with bin Laden being killed in 2011, and al-Qaeda, in terms of its capacity to conduct attacks on the homeland from Afghanistan, vastly degraded to the point where it is currently assessed that it does not have that capacity. Somewhere along the way, with the best of intentions, we also sought to remake the country and, in effect, to use military force to remake another society. And I think to your point, and the point that Senator Murphy and others have made, whatever our intentions, that is probably something that is beyond our capacity. And the net of that is that we were there for 20 years. We lost 2,461 Americans. 20,000 were injured, excuse me. About $2 trillion were spent in direct and indirect costs. That's the equivalent of about $300 million every single day for 20 years on average. And to those who say, well, yes, but you'd arrived in a place where the expenditures in terms of people and resources were sustainable, well, that's simply not the reality that we faced. Because, as we've discussed, given the deadline established for the removal of U.S. forces by the previous administration, the choice we had was either to go through with that and withdraw our forces, or to re-up the war, to escalate, to send in more forces, more loss of life, more loss of resources, indefinitely. And to what end? To what result? In terms of having something sustainable in a government or in security forces that could protect the country and uphold basic rights. So I think those lessons are important, they're profound, and I hope all of us together will reflect on those and other lessons that we've learned, both in what we've done tactically, including in this administration, as well as what we've done strategically across many administrations over 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I am worried about reports that we're seeing about acts of violence against journalists, women and girls, and the Taliban targeting minority groups like the Hazara people, groups who have a brutal history of committing violence against them are probably going to get worse. So what are we doing to ensure physical access for the NGOs that service these constituencies?
Thank you, Senator. These reports, which I've also seen, whether in media reporting and in videos and other reports, are deeply deeply disturbing. And I think whether it's us or whether it is many other countries around the world that we've been working to organize and to focus, this, of course, violates the basic expectations that we have of a Taliban-led government in terms of its need to not abuse these rights, but to uphold them. So we are working to make sure that we are all both speaking with one voice and acting together when it comes to using the influence and leverage we have with the Taliban to insist that it meet these expectations. Second, when it comes to humanitarian assistance and other kinds of support, besides providing that support to NGOs, to the United Nations and its agencies, we are doing whatever we can to help ensure that those agencies and those NGOs are able to operate, pressing directly and indirectly on the Taliban-led government to ensure their ability to do that and their protection. But this is very much a moving picture and something we're very focused on right now and in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, one final question. I understand this is not the main thing. I understand there are people who remain in mortal danger, but from your standpoint, the Department of State, you've got to be a little worried about morale for those people who have dedicated the better part of 20 years to this effort. And so what can we do? Not what can we say, but what can we do on behalf of the Foreign Service, especially at a time when we need to be building back our diplomatic corps?
Yeah, thank you for raising that, Senator, because you're exactly right, and it's very, very important to me, and it's very, very important institutionally. I've spent time with all of our returning diplomats from Afghanistan, either personally or virtually, depending on where they were, and spent a lot of time listening to them, hearing them, and trying to address the concerns that they have. And to your point, we have so many people who've invested their work, their careers, their lives in Afghanistan, developed relationships, a deep love for the country. And this is very challenging, painful for many of them. And of course, those who participated in the evacuation itself, who were literally at the gates at the Kabul airport, side by side with these extraordinary men and women in uniform doing that work, including the 13 who lost their lives, who were killed in the terrorist attack. I had officers who were literally serving next to them up to a couple of hours before that attack, knew them by first name. And so the impact, both over 20 years and more immediately, with our people who were there literally pulling people in to safety, helping to talk people in, to walk people in, officers around the department who stood up and volunteered to help in some way, and many of them who ran into HKIA to the airport to help get people out. So we're spending time talking to them, listening to them, and also providing them the support that some of them may need, including
Mr. Secretary, if I
mental
can
and
ask you
emotional
to
support.
sum up, we're over time and there's
Yeah, I'm
still
sorry.